So, hey, VIPs, if you guys want to go get some food, it's right over there. Just go help yourself over there. There's a buffet line. It's full of buffet, and it's a line. Complete transparency. The food is awesome.
Too many notifications. I really do need you to find your seats. We are going to open up this evening with prayer in just a minute. My name is Amber Krayhoff, and I get the honor, the privilege of introducing at least 3 amazing patriots this evening to you. Bringing them forward, these men that I get to introduce are fabulous, honorable men of integrity, and it's a rare thing in our culture now to have the privilege of doing that, particularly in our area. A lot of times we are the leaders that have put themselves into position are not honorable. We don't get to say that. I get that privilege tonight, and you get the honor and privilege of hearing them speak. I'm a little concerned about the fans being too loud. I know it's loud up here, it's fine back there. Are you guys okay up here? Okay. We'll wing it. So I'm going to ask Pastor Rick, would you mind coming up and blessing our evening tonight for us? I appreciate that.
Thank you, Amber. This morning, as I was in prayer, wasn't in prayer for this situation here, but I've been connected with a few other pastors, and every night of the week we meet at a church in Federal Way, and what we've been doing for the past year, since January 1st, we gather every night for an hour and a half to 2 hours just to pray. What we've been praying for is we've been praying for the land. We've been praying for the nation of America. And how many of you know that our nation was founded upon godly and biblical principles? You know that? You know most of the founding fathers who signed our Declaration of Independence were clergymen? Somewhere along the line over the generations and centuries, the clergy has pulled back from the public arena, the political arena especially. But I'm telling you, there is something new that's taking place. There is a remnant of ministers that are finally starting to get back engaged in the political process, not to establish a government or to establish a religion. It's not about that. It's to establish righteousness once again in the United States of America. And so this morning, as I was in prayer before going to church, I was in Psalm 107. And I just thought, as Amber asked me to come in and open in prayer, I thought, I was prompted by the Lord to share this. This is the scripture in Psalm 107, penned by King David. And he says this: Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them out of their distresses. He sent his word, and he healed them, and he delivered them from their destruction. And how many of you know prayer can change America once again? If we as people will gather together in your homes, in your churches, even in your workplaces. I know every once in a while Doug and I will get together in the office, another gentleman here from Doug's office, and we'll just spend a time before we start the work in prayer. Not just for the company, but prayer for this nation once again. And so join me if you would in prayer this morning. I want to pray specifically this scripture. The Bible again says, as the people began to cry out, as they began to humble themselves and cry out and seek God's wisdom, God's word was sent to heal the land. And so, Father, this night, Lord, as we've gathered here tonight, Lord, for political purposes, but Lord, nothing in this nation is just about political purposes. But Lord, it's about reestablishing your kingdom. It's about reestablishing your truth in the land of America once again. Lord, as our founding fathers landed upon the beaches of Virginia, Lord, they erected a cross on that beach, and they declared in the name of Jesus, and they dedicated the land, the nation, that the gospel will go from coast to coast, and then from coast to coast, it will also go from the land of America to all the nations of the world to preach the good news of what Jesus Christ has done. And so, Lord, we glorify your name this night. Lord, we pray for this nation as we cry out to you. Lord, that you will show up in a mighty way. Lord, that you will send your word once again and heal our land. And Lord, we declare in the name of Jesus, Lord, that you will expose, Lord, everything that has been happening in the dark places, Lord. Lord, the evil that has been taking place, Lord, to destroy this nation. Lord, we pray, expose them, Father. Expose what's been done in the darkness by the truth of your word. Let the light of your word, Lord, shine down upon this nation once again. And may we be truly one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This we pray, Father, in your name. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. Well, good preaching, man.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would all stand now, Carrie French is going to lead us in the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, sing us that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Carrie. May all be seated. Before thanking the American Patriots Alliance for their service this evening, for their delicious food, for the effort and the work that they put in to make sure that we could have this event this evening. Thank you so much. Right now, I would like to bring up a couple guest speakers. We have a couple candidates that are here this evening. We'd like to honor them with just a couple minutes to speak. Semi Bird is running.
When the pastor came up. Fellowship is a beautiful thing. Thank you, brother. And we don't forget where we come from. And we never will forget what this flag represents.
Amen.
There's been too many people throughout the life of this station that has bled, sacrificed, and died for the belief of liberty, freedom, and justice. And we cannot ever forget that. So today when we talk about election integrity, and celebrating a great citizen, Doug Basler, who's running for an office that we need to fulfill. We need to remember it's always more than just the candidate. It's what the candidate represents. We need to also remember as we serve, whether it's for King County in the office of elections or whether it's in the office of governor, these are positions of servitude to the citizens of this city, of the county, of the state, and in Olympia and in Washington, D.C. We need to remind these elected officials that they are public servants serving the people, and that we, the people, hold the power in this nation. And as I move forward across this entire state, you know I'm not the guy. I'm not the one who's been deemed the chosen one. And that is okay. Because I serve one. And that is good enough for me. I swore an oath to protect and to defend the Constitution of the United States of America, and that's good enough for me. I understand that our values, our morals, and our beliefs are good enough for me. And so what I run on, what I campaign on, and what I educate people on is to believe in America, to have hope in America. Is America the greatest nation on this planet? The nation whose flag represents diversity, whose flag represents hope, whose flag represents liberty, freedom, and opportunity. We must never forget it is we, the people, who stand behind this flag, because power is inherent to the people. Listen today from these great speakers. Heed their words. Stand strong, stand true for our beliefs. The time for giving an inch is over. It's time to take a stand and to protect this nation. We serve America and not the establishment. God bless you. God
Thank you, Cindy. I'm so excited to have. We have Kyle. Where's Kyle? There you are. Please come up, Kyle. We have a couple local races, school board races in Tahoma School District. Kyle, there's some flyers. I believe there's some literature on your tables. If you are in Tahoma School District, please grab those, take them with you. Kyle has more if you need. He's here representing them. I'm going to give him a couple minutes to speak to that. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you very much. It's really hard to follow that. I just wanted to tell you, I ran for school board 2 years ago, didn't make it, and it just so happens there's a lot of stuff going on in the Tahoma School District right now. We had two directors just quit on us. One of them was the one I ran against, so she decided just to quit on her own. Wow. That's fantastic. I can
Take it.
But we got three great candidates. We got Vincent Powell, Stephen Dutch, and Patrick Peacock. And they can really use your support if you're in the Maple Valley area, or even if you're in any other area. We've got a great chance to take the Tahoma School Board back to reason. Every candidate on this does not support CRT, does not support the books that are inappropriate in the education system. We support education, we support teachers, and we want the scores and our kids' chance of success to go up, not down. And there are two board members that resigned, Malia and Haley. They took their path and they decided they wanted to get out of the system because it was too hard. It was too hard to lead. And we need leaders, and these three people can lead our district out of the mess that it's in right now. It's a great school district. We've got the best teachers. We've got a great system. We also get to deal with the issue of a school board that has to elect a new superintendent. The superintendent decided he wants to leave at the end of the school year. Well, adding all the insult to injury, we've got a lot going on, and we are praying for solid hand leadership, and these three candidates are the best. Can you please get the word out? They need your votes. Now, the funny thing is Dutch is running against Malia, who quit. But her name recognition could make her actually get elected again, even after she quit, which would then put it in the board's position, which makes it even more important for Vince and Patrick. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm not going to take up any more. And Doug, let's win this, Doug. Where are you at? No, there you are, right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm sorry, the fans are actually really disorienting if you're speaking up here. So I don't know if anyone knows how to turn them up. I'm afraid if I touch something, it's going to explode. So if anyone can follow the wire and unplug it, I'm okay with that. In any case, I had an unexpected guest this evening that I want to bring up here. Ms. Carmen Gars, would you come up? Carmen she ran last year for State House, and she is running this year for the 8th Congressional District. I want to give you a couple minutes too.
Thank you. Yeah, so next year, 2024, I'm running to replace Kim Schreier in the 8th Congressional District. And like Philly, I'm not the man either. But I'm a woman that's going to ready to take Kim Schreier on. Here's what we're dealing with, right? Is we're here tonight, I'm here tonight because being honorable, being integrous, and having confidence in our election system is priority number one. And that's why I'm here to support Doug Basler in this fight to make it right for all of us. Thank you. Secondly, just so that those that don't know, I'm a wife, working mom, and yes, a grandma of 4. That's great. But I've been a commercial banker for over 20 years in the serving the South King County and Western and Eastern Washington areas. I know the pain that our businesses are serving. I know the pain of raising children. I know the cost to be in the middle class. My goal in running, my reason for running is to expand our middle class. My youth, my young adult daughters, right now is a millennial. Miss Dawn? Dramatic pause. I'll pause. Position. Is that better? I'm back. Thank you. You know, having millennials, we have not, as a community, as a society, given them a hope for a future. I'm not sure about how many of you have millennial children, but I don't want mine moving back home with the grandchildren either. And we need to provide an environment upon which they can grow, expand, and have their own families and have family values. I'm running to replace Ken Schreier to bring our family values back to Congress, to balance our budget. We can do this. We need your help. And it starts this year. It starts in this election 2023 with our local candidates. And so, Doug, we're ready to rock and roll.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I appreciate it. Are we at a loss for the, I know, sorry. I'm afraid to touch anything, otherwise I just gonna start yanking stuff. So it is time for us, this is what you're here for, election integrity. I've been fighting in the election integrity battle for a number of years now. It is brutal, I have to tell you. Here in Washington State, it's brutal. And Captain Seth Keshel is here this evening to analyze the numbers from the 2020 election and give us an inside view of analysis of what happened in Washington State and even a little bit about what happened in King County. So would you please join me in welcoming Captain Seth Keshel.
All right. I love the. Now that was the first thing that I needed to have done. I didn't even say it. So, Pastor, where are you at? When the Holy Spirit knows what we need before we even ask for it, what else do I need? Well, I need you guys to be done eating and consider making your way up through the middle aisleway here and over to the side, because we have one screen and I have lots of information to put out. So I came here to chew bubble gum and deny the 2020 election, and I am all out of bubble gum. So I need you guys to come up. That was a very nicely stated request, because you're not going to be able to see what I have put out from back there.
Bring your chair with you.
You can bring your chairs up if you want.
Let's huddle! I mean, I realize you guys were locked down for COVID, but I don't have it. And I would tell you another COVID joke, you probably won't get it.
So I'll tell you a quick story while you're all moving up here. The last time that I had the microphone here was actually during COVID. We were locked down, and our hostess, Deidre, actually allowed us to meet here when she was not supposed to. And at that point, we had a media infiltrator who was threatening us, and she was terrified. And we actually prayed over her and over her farm at that time that God would just protect us from being reported and protect her from getting a fine. So we've come a long way. This is way better.
There's an event that I did in Maryland last May. Funny enough, it appears in my slideshow. A bunch of normal, healthy, happy-looking folks coming to learn about election corruption in Maryland.
and off to my peripheral vision, there was a 20-something-year-old young lady slipping on and off a mask anxiously between sips of water. And then a month later, a big NPR hit piece came out. So how do I know there's no mainstream media here at the event? I don't see anybody wearing a mask. With that said, I want to make a couple points here, and I want to recognize some great people. Amber, thank you so much for your role in putting together the event. There's a lot that goes into organizing events that you may not know about. Even though her face isn't on the flyer, the point of having these events is not to hear somebody drone on and on and on about stuff. The day I start droning on and making this about me is the day I get my last presentation. This is not about me. Hey, people help me get to where I am. My job is to help other people get to where we need to be, and the promised land to me is fixing elections.
Yes.
That's what I care about. So the people that organize events are the ones who, when we start making progress in an area that is cloaked in darkness, which is how I would describe the entire Pacific Northwest, then they're going to come after the truth tellers. They're going to come after the people who organized events like that. And I've been to events that drew tons and tons of people, or one of the speakers said something extremely controversial, and they'll figure out who put the event on. So there are unsung heroes out there who are behind the curtain making things work. Simi, thank you for being here. Thank you for serving our country. A state like this that is occupied is not an easy task, because he's going to have to speak the truth, he's going to have to compete for votes, he's going to have to do the get out the vote stuff, he's going to have to ask for money. We got to stop being the cheap people if we're going to fight the enemy. Bill, would you stand up? This is Bill Brooks, if you don't know him. And also Erica with him. Now, Bill is a voice of truth in this state, and he's been at the election integrity battle longer than I've been at it. And he's been somebody who's really been driving the narrative here, and every time we got something in the Pacific Northwest, the first person I hear from is Bill Brooks. He is on top of stuff. He has had to deal with riding the fence between all these violent factions that hate each other's guts. And he's done an artful job of that, a fantastic job. So without Bill, I really don't think there would be a hope and a prayer for election integrity in Washington, but since he's here, then there is. Now, I love Washington. The 2020 election cured me of the red state, blue state nonsense. I used to be very polarized in my thinking. Somebody would ask me where I want to go on vacation. Well, are we going to the snow? How about Colorado? No, let's go to Montana. It's a red state. Want to go to the beach? Want to go to California? No, how about Florida? It's a red state. 2020 election made it very clear. It took so much cheating to overcome President Trump's re-election campaign that it was obvious for the first time here in Washington. You know, we'd kind of fallen into this. Now, it was obvious for other races here, like the gubernatorial races. But we'd fallen into this lull, red states and blue states, and we completely forget to campaign in 40 states, no matter who gets those electoral votes, leaving about 10 states where all the narrative and all the campaigning goes. That defies all known political history in America up until about 1992. My purpose being here tonight, obviously, is to support Doug. This is his event. He needs your full support. He is a truth teller regarding elections in a place where it's not going to be easy for him to tell the truth. What's going on? I don't talk about hopium. I talk about solutions. All of you that are in here, if you care about this and you're here for more than just to see what's going on, you have to take a role. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is something fairly new. It's called Lives. And if you follow my social media, I've put it out there. L-I-V-E-S, as if people from the Army need another acronym. But it's going to give every one of you an opportunity to figure out where you want to get involved as pertains to election integrity, specifically the 2024 election. Fight like you're 10 points behind, because in a lot of times you are. But there's no longer a spectator role in this fight. A lot of people sit around, want to watch. Well, I can't do it now. I got my son's wedding next year. I got kids going to college in 2 years. I've got my 401k that I can't lose. I'm almost tenured. I got to stay around a little bit longer. And gradually we run out of time. They run the clock out. They continue to entrench their policies. Right now, because of the scare of Trumpism, The Democrat states are now entrenching by law the shortcuts that they put into practice in 2020. Look no further than Minnesota. Democrat trifecta this year. They put in place special laws for automatic voter registration. So every illegal alien is being registered on the rolls. Now, of course, they don't vote, right? Well, maybe we'll let them vote in the municipal elections. You think that's happening in the general elections? Mail-in ballot practices, ballot harvesting. So now's the time to take a stand if you're ever going to take a stand. Because it's a very late hour in the republic that you think you know. This is the cycle of nations. This is not unheard of before in powerful nations that have been around a long time. It's unheard of now because America hasn't gone through something quite like this. The Civil War was bad, but it was different. This is something that threatens to completely undo the sinews of the republic if we do not get control of the system of elections. So now we're going to talk about it. We're going to inject a little bit of humor here and there, maybe a pop quiz, to make sure that we're all paying attention. But I will say it's great to be back in the Pacific Northwest. Samuel Adams is my favorite founding father. Interestingly enough, he was not an entrenched career politician. He was known for his wit and his valor and his candor. He would have a popping Twitter account if he were alive today. And he had to speak to the same people that we speak to today. How many of you know passive people? They have an opinion. You know, 62% of Americans believe the 2020 election was tainted with fraud. But where are they? So it's easy to have an opinion. It's easy to sit on Facebook and put memes out there. But we have to activate people that are passive. And Samuel Adams had to do the same thing. He spoke to people that were passive because the colonists had it pretty good. Where's the lady from England? The colonists had it pretty good, didn't they? My daughter, 6 years old, speaks in the working class accent of London Cockney. Now, the colonists had it pretty good. A lot of them had large estates. They had property, they had businesses, they had wealth, and they had more freedom than we have today. But of course, the claws of the state began to encroach and tyranny became the norm. The Boston Massacre accelerated a few things, and Samuel Adams eventually wound up saying this to the people who were too afraid to stand up and blaze a new trail. If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. That last line really gets me. Posterity, all these generations that are yet to come, because they are going to come. Are they going to look back at this time where history records all of this upheaval in America at the beginning of the 21st century? We're still in the first quarter of the new millennium, the new century. And are they going to look back at a bunch of passive people who still had it pretty good? Because everybody here can go get a hot dog. We can go to the movies. We can go to the ball game. We can probably afford a flight out of here. A lot of you can afford to move out of here. A lot of people think that Texas is going to save them. If you saw the Ken Paxton trial, Texas ain't going to save you. Texas needs saving. So, this quote resonates with me. It means you have to do something. You can no longer sit around and expect that the generations to come won't look back and hold us guilty for not trying to save this country. Now, I am what the media likes to call, are you worried I'm going to trip?
Yes.
I'm what the media likes to call an election denier. Does anybody want to hear President Trump introduce me?
Yes.
So I met a Trump impersonator at the last Reawaken America tour. And this was extremely funny. And I paid the dude $100 to record my phone, my voicemail. Now if I can only find it. So anybody that calls me and I don't pick up, and now I'm not picking up on purpose, so people hear my voicemail, but it's just brilliant.
My fellow Americans, you've reached the voicemail of Captain Seth Keshel. Very tall guy, 6'6", perhaps 6'7", right? So tall. No one does election analysis like him. We totally won, and he can prove it. They call him Captain K. And frankly, he's a great guy, so leave a message after the beep. Very strongly, okay?
All right. The media calls me an election denier. Does anybody else here fit that description? Okay, not you, Cheryl. Why not? All right. You need to rename yourselves. We are not election deniers. We are fraud affirmers. My life on the road for the past 2 years has been pretty interesting. By the way, this is me here in the blue sport coat. I have been blessed to walk along some true giants in the field of election integrity, and also avoided most of the infighting. That is Joe Oltman over here on the left. Joe never found a fight that he didn't like to get involved in. Holly from Georgia, who's done some great work with the election integrity out there with hand counting. Tony Shoup from Audit the Vote, Pennsylvania, who's a real warrior. It was such a worry in the minds of the Philadelphia media that if Doug Mastriano won the governorship last year, that she would be appointed Secretary of State. She had preemptive hit pieces written about her. If you ever get there, you're doing something right. And then next to her, that's Corrine from Audit the Vote, Hawaii, who has proven that it was not normal that Joe Biden outperformed Barack Obama in Hawaii without campaigning. And then we meet some interesting folks along the way, like Carrie Lake, who gives me a hard time on Twitter in front of 1 million people. Apparently I messed up her photos. Then you meet some really famous people out there sometimes. I've had the honor to meet President Trump twice. Then things get a little more serious. You avoided this one. In 2021, late 2021, November, I went up to New Hampshire. And I did an event there with David Clements and Ivan Raiklin. And Reuters sent a reporter. Reuters, of course, is a global news organization. And it was interesting and kind of cool to be hit by a global news piece where they're really just trying to debunk your stuff that 5 out of 8 Americans already agree with me on. So I'm already in the winning column. And later in December, the piece ran. Now they profile what the title says, the 4 military intelligence veterans leading the disinformation campaign, as they call it. That would be Lieutenant General Mike Flynn. That would be Colonel Phil Waldron, Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Raiklin, and then the junior officer of the bunch, myself, Captain Seth Keshel. And this article came out. And then on January the 4th, 2022, I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I got a text from my boss, hey, are you going to get on your meeting? Because I had a normal job at that time. I was selling traffic control devices to cities and state governments and moonlighting at night at Patriot events. And by then the word had gotten out, and I pulled up this call that I didn't expect, and it was my boss, and it was the HR lady. And that was my last day working a normal job. I was pushed off the gangplank into the space in which I now occupy. Now God has taken care of me every step of the way. But it was a blessing to me to be forced off when I had nothing but indecision prior to how I was going to handle this. The lesson in this is you don't know when your number is going to be called. I had no social media following prior to the election of November 3rd, 2020. I had a personal Facebook account with a few hundred friends. Nobody knew who I was. Things have changed. But all you have to do is knock over one serious pillar of corruption, maybe being elected as the elections director in one of the most corrupt counties in the country, or being somebody who was a key driver of said campaign, or being somebody who's about to shake, rattle, and roll and run for governor when everybody wants change. It's only going to be so many stolen elections before people are going to not tolerate the system anymore. This lesson was for me, and it's for you, is that you have to make peace now with the fact that when, not if, but when you make the changes that knock over corruption, you are going to become a target. Your business is going to become something that is targeted. Your past, if you have any dirt, which we all do, is going to become subject to scrutiny. So now's a good time, like Samuel Adams would have said, to figure out if this is something that you want to get involved in, because don't get involved in it to be doing it half-assed. My dad said nothing in life worth having is worth doing half-assed, and I mean that with all my heart. So get in to kill it and do a great job. All of the media has gone after me. The Washington Post, the USA Today, everything from the Associated Press, local press. I've been, you name it, I've been in it. Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm going to talk about a local one here in just a second. NPR, National Propaganda Radio. I mentioned the event in Maryland where the young lady with the mask was there. Well, she was writing my quadrant of the story for NPR. They profiled 4 prominent so-called election deniers: me, David Clements, Mike Lindell, and Dr. Doug Frank. And they thought they were really savvy with their color-coded map for all the events. Now, what it really does is it makes us look like a squadron of badasses. Covering up something like that took Meriwether Lewis and William Clark 2.5 years to cover. And I was moderately pleased. It came out at the end of June 2022. I was moderately pleased because I was given credit for the most states at 37. I have now done election integrity events in more than 40 states. But much to my chagrin, they gave a 61-year-old math teacher from Ohio more events than me. So I was really not thrilled about that. And by the way, that is my handy-dandy trusty vest right there. And I did what any good Army intelligence officer would do, and I put together an accurate map, and I sent it over to NPR and asked them to publish it, and this is my updated map as of today. Those are my travels for the past 2 years. 43% of all counties and independent cities in the United States I've either driven through, or if in green, I've done an event in. So water covers 70% of the earth, and I cover the rest. Now this one was some local action. I will be back here in Clark County a month from now at the Patriots United event. But this was last September. It was almost a year ago to the date. And I flew in here to Seattle, and I ran down the interstate. People are like, that's so far. It's like 2.5 hours. That's like in and out of Dallas on a work day. And I came down to the beautiful Columbia River where Lewis and Clark once sailed, right across from nasty, even worse off than Seattle, Portland, Oregon. And I denied the 2020 election in Washington like I'm about to do in a little bit of time. What was interesting is the Seattle Times sent a paid propagandist named Jim Bruner down the interstate to cover the event. And I had the jokes rolling. I had it all going on that night. 500 or so people were there. Mike Terry really knows how to get the band together quarterly. And I denied the election. And of course, Jim Bruner didn't like it too much, and he wrote an article about the event, and he said, Seth Keshel, he's a former military captain. Correct, not precise. And then in the very next paragraph, he called me an ex-Navy officer. So what that means is I was given a promotion of 3 pay grades to naval captain. Now that's some clout right there. So the experts have told you the 2020 election was the safest and most secure election of all time. Have they not? Yes. And what that means to me in my logical mind is that with the progression of technology and data and best practices, that the 2022 midterms must have been even safer and more secure than the 2020 election, which means that we can only expect the 2024 election to be something that is impeccable and unimpeachable. I don't know that I believe that. But the experts have told me how great the 2020 election was, so I really briefly want to touch on 4 national points. So if you're new to this, and you really want to get up there on your roof and deny the 2020 election, and you only got 2 minutes of your neighbor's attention, well, here's 4 really good points for you to bring up. We have these things called bellwether counties. There's a lady here from Clallam County that I met on the way in. Ann, where are you? Ann already got bored and left. There are 19 counties in the country out of 3,143. There are 19 counties that since 1980 have aligned with the winner of every presidential election perfectly. Every single election. That means Ronald Reagan won them twice. George Bush won them in 1988. Bill Clinton won them twice. George W. Bush won them twice. Obama won them twice. Donald Trump won them all in 2016, and guess what? In 2020, Donald Trump officially carried 18 of the 19 bellwether counties that are predictive in showing us who is most likely to win an election, because they align with the voting sentiment of the non-college working class voter. Up here in the Northeast especially, this is what they call the white working class. Now, as the country becomes more diverse, Simi and I were just having this conversation, conservative populism, aka America First, actually appeals to the working class of all colors, which is something the Republican Party has not been able to do prior to Donald Trump bringing populism to our side. Strangely, the only bellwether that slipped off the hook in the official results was Clallam County, right here in the Olympic Peninsula. My numbers suggest strongly that Trump carried Clallam by at least 10 points in the 2020 election. So the translation is, Donald Trump managed to win the counties that are perfect, aligning with our winners since 1980, but didn't win. Well, you know what, Captain K, that's it's an interesting point. Definitely give that one to you. But it was a weird election. Trump was polarizing. COVID, mail-in ballots. Okay, all right, fine. How about bellwether states? Why don't we dial it up a notch? We have a bigger sample size to draw from rather than these small counties. These 4 states, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, and Florida, since 1896. How many of you guys were alive in 1896? You were. You may laugh, but we have canvassers in here that will probably confirm that some of your mail-in voters were alive in 1896. Am I right? We have voters born in 1885 in Pennsylvania. It's incredible. I mean, Biden really had the full support of the centenarian 120 plus demographic. These 4 states, since 1896, when all 4 go to the same candidate, regardless of party, when a single candidate wins all 4 of these states, in 13 out of 13 occasions that has happened since 1896, that candidate has won the presidency. Except for in the safest and most secure election of all time in 2020. But there's nothing to see here. Really, that could be explained away, mail-in ballots. All right, fine. Donald Trump didn't have the full support of the Republican Party. Has anyone heard that one? You hear it from the same folks. I heard it earlier when I was sitting here listening. You got all these people say, don't talk about elections. Don't talk about Trump. We just don't have the numbers. We don't have the vote. Interesting. So Donald Trump did not have the full support of the Republican Party. Now, logically speaking, we'll get to that on the next slide. Donald Trump had 94% of the Republican Party primary share in 2020 with no valid contender to his nomination. People poured out of their homes at the beginning of the pandemic, when a lot of you who are wise to what the pandemic was about were probably a little bit worried about it. 94%. That happens to be the 4th highest share of the primary vote for either party of all time. And primaries began for the presidency in 1912. So did Donald Trump have the full support of the GOP? Absolutely. One of the highest party ratings in the history of presidential primaries. And then the final point, and probably my favorite from the national perspective, is incumbent vote gain. I'm going to go back further in time than 1896. I'm going to go back to 1888. That is a long time ago. I sat in front of the Arizona Senate and heard from some of their members, and one of them was a Romney class, McCain class Republican named Ken Bennett, trying to grill me on these numbers, saying that I just cherry picked my data. I have 132 years of sample. They have 3 months worth of polling and narratives about people don't like Trump, which is strange because everywhere I go, people love Trump. Since 1888, what happened in 1888? Grover Cleveland was the president running for re-election. And Grover Cleveland gained votes from his first election in 1884, but he lost to Benjamin Harrison, the Republican, making Grover Cleveland the last incumbent president to gain votes and lose re-election until the safest and most secure election of all time, when Trump not only gained votes, but gained 11 million votes, which is one of the highest single-cycle vote gains in the history of the presidency. Back to the previous one, If Trump didn't have the full support of the Republican Party, he still gained 11 million votes. So if it wasn't from Republicans, then it had to be from independents and moderates who I'm told hate Donald Trump. So if that's the case, then the 11 million gain had to be from Democrats. And if it was from Democrats, then where the hell does Joe Biden have 81 million votes from? Maybe that's just me being too logical. Nationally, nobody can get out of my analysis, and that's why when the press comes at you to pick at you, they go after your associations and any personal issues you've ever had. And that brings us to Washington. Does anybody want to hear about Washington? Okay. Let me tell you a story. I was going over my data for King County last time I was up here. I was up here in February in Woodinville, February 2022. Seems like ages ago. And I reviewed the precinct level data all the way down to the lowest precinct. How many precincts are in King County? 1,000, right? I found a precinct, obviously a historical Democrat precinct, not one that you'd expect a Republican to carry. It was close to core urban Seattle. And Joe Biden won 100% of the vote in the precinct. 100%. And it wasn't a special small precinct like the ones you find up in Snohomish County that have 12 voters in it. This was 376 for Biden, 0 for Trump, 0 third party. And I got here really early that day. Then I went down to this area over by the Sound, and I pulled out my laptop, started going over numbers. And I expected to take opposition here. This is 100% Biden precinct with a lot of votes. Definitely a lot of wokeness in this place. And I started going over the national data, kind of like I just showed you, and I started looking into Washington. And people that, had gone by, nobody wanted to fight me. Nobody wanted to argue with my points. I think that by then, even 1 month into the Biden presidency, year and a month into the Biden presidency, nobody wanted to talk about this information. And after about 30 minutes, I got bored with it, closed up my computer, and I stood up and I left that cemetery. So Washington State, when is the last time Washington State gave its electors to their Republican nominee for president? Reagan in 84 is the correct answer. Bush lost the state in 88, but it was close. Clinton won it comfortably a couple times. And then in 2000, in the 2000 election, Washington was thought by the media to be a swing state. Bush wound up losing Washington by 5 in 2000. So the state was pretty competitive all the way up until 2 decades ago, and truly Washington was a swingy state for most of the second half of the 20th century. But what about 2020? Because you must have seen all of those Biden boat parades and car parades and signs all over the place, since this state is so blue, correct? Washington has a very interesting dynamic on the left. The left has suppressed their grassroots base. Their populism uprising is the Bernie Sanders uprising. There's a lot of Bernie bros in the Pacific Northwest, especially the liberal whites, which the Pacific Northwest is full of. Then you have conservative populism on the rise here because Oregon and Washington have a very large non-college white working class demographic that is historically sided with unions and voted Democrat. There were counties that have been Democrat counties since the 1920s in coastal Washington and Oregon, like Grays Harbor County. Herbert Hoover won Grays Harbor County in 1928, and then in 32 it was flipped Democrat and didn't come back to the Republican Party until Donald Trump won it in 2016. So those trends were present in 2016, and people accurately assessed that Trump would surge in the Pacific Northwest, especially with left-wing violence in your cities, driving out an atypical Republican voting base here, which is your suburban women's vote. That is actually one of the biggest lies you have, is that suburban women came out against Trump. No, they came out in support of not having their kids' heads smashed open by baseball bats. It's a true story. Now, Washington State, did we think it was going to go to Trump? Maybe, maybe not. But we're going to start in 2004. Washington is not a blowout Democrat state. It's only drifted that way in the Obama years, and a lot of it's been because Republicans are leaving for other states or putting their swords down, hopeless. Not wanting to organize, not wanting to get along, not wanting to get on point. And what happens when you do that, when you embrace complacency, the Democrats in control start putting in stuff like mail-in ballots. So in 2012, you had a nearly all mail-in presidential election. And then in 2016, you had another one, and now it's solidified. And with the mail-ins come corrupted voter rolls, come the ballot harvesting. Complacency is what got us here. The opposite of complacency, which is diligence, is going to get us out of it. The population of Washington State is different than a lot of blue states. It's growing, up almost 1 million according to the last census. Total population of 7.7 million. Washington happens to be the only state that is a blue state. Remember, I'm using air quotes here. That I believe was deprived of an elector in the last census go-round. The Electoral College has been shorted 12 to 16 Republican electoral votes by manipulation of the census data. So if you thought the elections was all that was being manipulated, well, you're wrong. In Washington State, let me explain to you what you're seeing on my slide. This is the year of the election, 2004. This is your Republican nominee. This is George W. Bush. Democrat nominee is John Kerry, 2004. And this is your margin of victory. If it's in blue, obviously it's a Democrat win, a Democrat margin of victory. So John Kerry in 2004 beats George W. Bush by 7.2%. The margin between the two candidates is just over 200,000 votes. So we have 200,000 vote deficiency, 7% margin. This is a fairly competitive state. You can actually enjoy some basic freedoms and human rights in a state that is within 10 points on either side. Now, what happens in 2004? George Bush wins the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, but only because he won Ohio. He would have lost Ohio, he would have lost the election. Now, this began, if you're being honest with yourself, one of the worst second terms in the history of the United States presidency. Completely decimated the Republican Party. We had 2 wars raging that we couldn't win, right? And never had any chance to win them if you study counterinsurgencies throughout history. We had the birth and development, growth and sustainment of a surveillance state with the signing of the Patriot Act. We had a financial collapse, a housing collapse, and an economic collapse. But then you have a natural political pendulum which is ushering out the party in power, the Republican Party, after 8 years. That was evident in the 06 midterms. And then the Democrats countered with a very popular, charismatic, young candidate, minority candidate, who still controlled the Democrat unions with the white working class, who got the suburban women's vote, who got the people that didn't want to be called racist anymore vote. Then he got a record minority turnout with a record share of the vote against a curmudgeon of a Republican candidate who was way past his time. So you have this left trend that was going to happen anyway, and then you have a superstar candidate who is somebody with Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump who would put them in generational candidates in the last 40 plus years. The result is, nationally, we go from Republican +3 to Democrat +7. That is a 10-point swing nationally. And it's going to reflect itself in 45 states. Only 5 states became more Republican when McCain ran. And they were mostly in the Deep South. In Washington State, you go from being a 7-point state to 17. So Barack Obama trends the state 10 points Democrat. This is the year that you guys probably started losing hope for your state. 20 years ago, the state was fairly competitive and potentially winnable, and they were having to rip off gubernatorial races in broad daylight, finding the ballots. So you were still competitive 20 years ago. This is what made things problematic. Now what happens? Write the number down. Barack Obama gains 240,000 votes. My detractors like to tell me that I cherry-pick data. No, I assess population change over a period of time. So Washington State is growing, and it has been growing by roughly the same amount of people every decade for the past 5 decades. So yes, I can account for what population change should be doing to total number of votes. This is the most popular Democrat candidate of a generation, and he only gains 240,000 votes in one cycle. It's big enough in a state that's not that big, Washington's not much bigger than Arizona, that it drops the Republican column by 75,000. Why? Because a lot of the mushy middle moderate that voted for George Bush in 2004 came over here and voted for Obama, along with a lot of woke white liberals, along with a bigger minority turnout and share of the vote. So there's your shift. Voter registrations in the state came up by 122,000 total statewide. So now what happens? We're going to have 43 states become more Republican in 2012. Now the problem for Mitt Romney was he did not attract the non-college white vote, which Donald Trump did get in the Rust Belt. Romney was not able to draw out the conservative vote. He didn't pick up minority voters. He couldn't pick up low propensity voters. Romney made 43 states more Republican only because Barack Obama replaced George Bush as one of the worst incumbent presidents in the history of the White House. Obama lost more than 3 million votes in his re-election campaign nationally. And that makes him only the third campaign to lose votes since 1888 to be re-elected. Franklin Roosevelt did that twice. So what happens in Washington? Washington joins 42 other states and becomes more Republican by 2 points. So there's a 2-point Republican trend in the state. Mitt Romney gains 61,000 votes. Obama only gains 5,000 votes in a state that is growing. Now, Romney, of course, isn't even as high as George Bush is in total votes. So Romney was not the reason the state had a Republican trend. It was Obama slowing down his pace of gain. So there's a smaller margin of defeat between the two candidates, but getting close to 500,000 votes at this point. Voter registration, 275,000. So it appears somewhere around 2010 that there was more automatic voter registration put in place to bloat that number. Voter registration is the key to all of this. So now we have something's going to change on the Republican side. Also on the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton steals the Democrat nomination. Bernie Sanders is very popular here in Washington State, which is also why there were 4 electoral votes that went to someone other than Hillary Clinton in 2016, because the grassroots left electors did not approve of Hillary Clinton. Now in 2016, Donald Trump is going to have the punt the ball between the 30-yard line effect, and he's going to drop votes from Mitt Romney. So he's basically back where John McCain was. This is your moderate Republican vote going back in third party. But look, Hillary Clinton is below Barack Obama. The margin drifts slightly off to the left, so you trend almost a point to the left. That's largely because Trump did not solidify the moderate Republican base. Really no change here. 365,000 new registered voters net. Now, what does somebody who does pattern analysis see here? The Republican Party is stuck in the 1.2 million vote range for 3 consecutive elections, really 4, right here, right at 1.3. The Republican Party is absolutely stuck. If you're forecasting for Trump in 2020, are you even going to make it to 1.3 million? I would consider that to be some success. But the Democrats are stuck too. Ever since Obama peaked in 2008, they're right at 1.75 million votes, 3 elections in a row. You have almost the same exact score, 3 elections in a row. So what are we going to look for? We're going to look for maybe 1.3 million for Trump in 2020. 1.3 million would be good. How about 1.6? Trump goes up 363,000 votes in Washington State, which is supposedly mega blue, and by the way, the margins are stuck between 15 and 17 points, 3 elections in a row. 15 to 17 points, 3 elections in a row. And now we have a boom for the party that is the underdog party. These guys can't gain votes anyway. And now the Democrats have pissed off the left-wing grassroots, but didn't show up and vote for Hillary Clinton. Which way do you think this number is going to be going in 2020? Should be going down. You should be below 1.7 million votes on a collision course with this number and a potentially close result. I would look for 1.7 million Biden votes. You guys down with 1.7 million? So Donald Trump gains 363,000 votes. Trump gains 363,000 votes. And the Democrats can't grow anymore. But Joe Biden gains 600,000 plus votes. Joe Biden gained 627,000 votes over Clinton. All right. Am I crazy? Okay. So it's Biden plus 19. Somebody decided, no matter how many votes Trump gains, we're going to trend Washington to the left by 3 more points. That's what happened. So however many votes is needed to get this result is how many votes were put out. My adjusted margin, I'm actually very generous in giving Biden some of that third-party vote back. I've still got Biden below 1.8 million. That gives Biden a margin of victory of 5.6%. If I'm undercutting King County substantially, Trump could have won Washington State. All right, total votes. Let me show you how this works. A little bit of a view into my mind. Remember, Washington State has grown by the same amount for several decades in a row. So I can forecast total votes based on what percentage of growth is happening. That's how many votes were cast between John Kerry and George Bush in 2004, including third-party candidates. Total votes presidentially, 2.86 million in 2004. Now you're going to continue to grow, and now you got somebody really popular running, Barack Obama, 3.06 million. So that's a gain of just under 200,000. So 200,000 more votes after 4 years of population growth and the emergence of Barack Obama. 200,000 votes. Obama versus Romney. Well, that one's kind of low enthusiasm here. Not even 70,000 new votes. Only 67,000 new votes. This signifies that this was the first election on mass mail-in balloting. So this is when it changed. That's another tell nationally that I've used Oregon and Washington to prove. Well, Michigan and Georgia and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Arizona, that's because of the mail-in ballots. That's going to boom your turnout. Is it going to boom your turnout? Really? Because I got the same thing going on in Oregon where nobody gave a rat's ass about mail-in ballots. All right, now in 2016, you got 200,000 per election, maybe 100,000. I would expect Trump versus Clinton at this rate to have about 3.3 million votes. What do you know? 3.3 million votes. So if we go another 200,000 in 2020, you should look for about 3.5 million votes in Trump versus Biden. Maybe 3.6 if it's a really big election. 3.6? You haven't seen that slide yet, Bill, have you? So 200,000 over 2016 is 3.5. 200,000 more is 3.7. 200,000 more is 3.9. And we're over that too. So there's my 590,000 excess votes for Joe Biden in Washington, which makes Washington the most fraudulent state of 2020 with 49,000 fraudulent votes per elector. Now the statewide map. My 4 most critical counties in terms of number of fraudulent Biden votes are Spokane, Snohomish, King, and Pierce counties. The counties that are in yellow are counties that reversed against what is an eminent Republican trend, president in 2016 or 2020. And these counties over here in the light green appear to have excess votes, but trended in a more Republican direction based on population size. Snohomish, King, Pierce, and Spokane all have a minimum 48,000 fraudulent Biden votes each. I'd have Trump carrying Clark and Pierce counties in Washington in 2020. This scorecard, you can get a little bit closer if you want. It's very granular, but it's my final tally sheet on my analysis. Certified result in Washington, 784,000 votes between the two candidates, Biden by 19, which is a left trend from 2016 despite 363,000 new Republican votes. A more realistic result looks like this with Trump at 45% of the vote. Now I'm going to show you King County next. I'm very conservative in my estimates. So I'm light. I'm just telling you I'm light. Depending on how much has been baked into King County for several decades now, Trump could have won Washington in 2020. But either way, it was a bang-bang race. King County. So in Las Vegas, right before General Flynn asked me to shake it up a little bit. Because I've been talking about the 10 points for true election integrity, which I will touch on, and I've already talked with Doug about them. He wanted me to get the crowd interested in how everyone can take a role in winning the 2024 election. Now, if you're one of these people who realizes what I realize, that the machinery is in place to probably screw your electoral votes over in 2024. Not necessarily the governor's race. How do we make this a long-term effort? Because when we get Donald Trump back in the White House, that's when we get him. Right? The fight doesn't stop. We got him in there in 2016, and everybody posted memes for 4 years with the left plan on how to rig the next election. So every day is politics to them. That's why I was so upset after the midterms. I knew in 2022 that we were going to take 2 months off. 2 months off. I like Thanksgiving and I like Christmas, and I like them both for about 2 days each. Because the left, the day after the midterms, before Katie Hobbs even had her election certified, was already busy figuring out how to rob the 2024 election. We have to have the same tenacity. So how do we get involved in either investing and winning in 2024 with these candidates, or winning long term? Because if you don't want to fight for King County, then you might as well not be involved in politics in Washington at all, because they control your state from that one county. You might as well go find your little parcel of land in the panhandle of Idaho, because they'll come screw that up for you too. Now it might take 30 years, but they'll come for that as well. Here's what we have to do. I created an acronym like all good Army officers do. We're going to fight for their lives. LIVES. And of course, I came out to the 1980s Hulk Hogan entrance theme, which is "Fight for your life." Those are the lives I fight for. That is Eden, at age 11. She's 5'4". This is Willow, who's 6, and this is Eli, who's 8. My kids insult each other by calling each other rhinos, communists, and Democrats. And I took Eden to see Mount Rushmore. I took all three to see Mount Rushmore and Labor Day weekend. And I was telling Eden about the presidents on there. You know, we have George Washington up there. He symbolizes the birth of the country. Then we have Thomas Jefferson, who symbolizes the westward expansion of the country. Lincoln, who symbolizes the salvation of the country. And then we have Theodore Roosevelt, which symbolizes the economic explosion of America. And I said, do you know what's interesting about Rushmore? And she goes, there's no Democrats on it. I have it on video. So this is what LIVES stands for. Lead, investigate, volunteer, engage, and show up. And I'm going to tick through all of them. Number 1, lead. Not everybody is a leader. It's okay that not everybody's a leader. If we had all leaders, then we get nothing done. But we have a serious shortage of leaders. Let me give you a great example. Symbolically, I would consider Maricopa County, Arizona, to be the crisis center, ground zero for the election integrity crisis. 2018, 2020, and 2022, 3 times in a row. We have 43% of precinct committee man / precinct captain spots filled in Maricopa County. 5 years after the 2018 midterm, 3 years after the 2020 presidential, and coming up on a year after Kerry Lake's stolen governor's race. 57% of precinct committee man spots are open in Maricopa County. But I'll tell you what, Republicans in Arizona, I guarantee you that more than 80% of them believe that the Republicans were cheated at the top of the ticket in those 2 races. So where are they? If 1 out of 25 Republican men under 80 would step up, they would have all 100% of them filled. So where are the people? And where especially are the men leading in this fight? And I do mean that to call people to action. And that is not to denigrate the efforts of the women of this movement. We got to have your leadership out there. We have to have people volunteer to lead. Leadership can be a lonely place, but it's something that has to be done. Precinct committee man is important. Anybody want me to answer that? I've done that before. It's really fun.
Can you do the intros, please?
No, we got major problems. We totally won Washington, believe me. So, precinct captain. I guarantee you the Republican Party of King County, or whichever county you came in from, has a shortage in precinct committee men, precinct captains. These are the people that are charged with registering voters, with turning out voters, with helping people understand issues, with helping people get access to ballots, getting people equipped to get out there and vote, and also to represent the party to the people. I am very cynical about the big Republican Party, but I never go local and denigrate the efforts of local Republicans. We all feel the same. So right now the Republican Party is the only vehicle for the America First agenda. So we need people to fill in leadership spots. And I've had a lot of veterans come up to me and say, you know what, I decided to step up and lead. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to learn. The best thing that ever happened to my leadership skills was getting thrown to the wolves in Afghanistan when I didn't have my captain over me and I was in charge for 3 months. And I made all my mistakes, bumped my face on the ground for 3 months, and then I got it together and I was probably the best assistant intelligence officer in the country. Number 2, investigate. A lot of us have been doing that. Bill's been doing that. Bill, make sure before we leave, what's your Substack website called?
It's just all things good.
Bill has his Substack called All Things Politics. He's investigated Washington State corner to corner, all 36 counties, right? 39 counties. He's got the state covered. He also has networks of people all over the place set up that know what they're doing to pass on lessons learned. Investigating is what I've been doing for 2.5 years and making that known. But we have to make stuff known to people. So what are we doing? Canvassing is one way to investigate. In a mail-in only state, they're using fraudulent registrations to send mail ballots to addresses that may be completely fictitious. There's a guy named Chris Jersky in Florida who will show you that the secretaries of elections have found ways to get ballots to fictitious addresses that otherwise reject any other piece of mail. Very interesting. In Pennsylvania, Audit the Vote PA has found a 40% discrepancy rate in certain counties, like Berks County, for instance, or Lancaster County. That means we went to 10 houses, and at least 4 of them had one guy registered here who's not real, who voted. Tick by tick, piece by piece, cut by cut, death by 1,000 cuts. Canvassing is finding the dormitories. Right here, Dane County. These are apartments in Dane County, Wisconsin. This apartment complex here is very special because it has 312 registered voters over 20 units, which is 16 registered voters per unit. Down here we have 23 registered voters per unit in this apartment building, 21 in this one, and this is a nursing home with a 2-to-1 registered voter to bed ratio. Wisconsin, of course, was decided by 20,682 votes at 3:45 in the morning, and America woke up to Wisconsin and Michigan gone from a Trump blowout the night before. And this is how it's done. So the canvassing is the way this stuff is found out. If you have a sheriff, which here in King County I'm sure you don't, but if the sheriff cares about this kind of stuff, he should be all over it. That the registrar of voters is maintaining a voter roll that allows fictitious addresses or women registered under a maiden name and a married name and a second married name, or somebody who's moved out who's not taken off the rolls, somebody who's dead who's not off the rolls, somebody who's illegally here who's now being registered through an automatic voter registration program, and then they send the mail-in ballots out. You guys get me, right? You have to have a registration to support the vote. And that's what's going on. And then the use of law. In Gwinnett County, Georgia, we had a activist down there who realized that the law prohibits registrations at P.O. boxes. So she challenged a bunch of voter registrations on many grounds, including we found all these registrations that are sitting in apartment complexes and the county doesn't want to touch them. But now we have no doubt proof these are voter registrations at P.O. boxes, which are forbidden by Georgia state law. So now we have a trial coming up in Gwinnett County to potentially remove not just those in Gwinnett County, but all throughout Georgia. That's because of the work of investigators. So you think you know everything? People like Bill, who are sources of local knowledge, are the ones who are going to find out where those intelligence gaps are, because we have to get the information. Point number 3, V, volunteer. So if you don't consider yourself a leader, or more realistically and acceptable, you don't have the time to invest in leading, volunteering is important. People may not think these positions are important, but the Democrats fill all of these positions. And they do it in every way possible. But volunteering can take many forms in elections. A couple examples, poll watchers. Now, that may not be a thing in an all mail-in voting state, but election judges are important as well. Volunteering to help get out the vote, volunteering to help with the Republican Party's efforts, volunteering to help candidates like him, volunteering to help candidates like Doug. They need your volunteer effort. We're always strapped for cash. The left is not. And this is also another reason why I harp so much about economics and why I promote Patriot alternatives for spending your money. Because if we keep on trickling the money down to the big box companies and putting in Netflix and buying DirecTV and NFL Sunday Ticket, we're going to continue funding our own demise. I was at an event in Arizona for a few great freedom candidates, awesome candidates. And it was a pretty well-to-do place with a well-to-do crowd. And none of these candidates raised more than $500. So what are we doing out there? You know, what are we holding on to our money for? Because we've got to be able to fund the efforts that are going to matter. He's going to need your money. He's going to need your money. It takes a lot to break through this cognitive dissonance and this thickness of mind here that is going to have to break at some point. Volunteering is critical. You may not think it's a leadership position because it's not, but it's equally critical because the leaders need their soldiers. Number 4, engage. That is putting actions on the objective. Voter registration. Are we doing it? Richard Barris is one of my favorite pollsters. Anybody heard of him? The People's Pundit? He goes on War Room a lot. He was in Maricopa County for Kerry Lake's trials. For the first time in a long time, polls of all adults are favoring Republican candidates. Normally when you just poll adults or registered voters, they favor left, they go left, and then once you start dialing into the likely voters, they start to move to the right. But right now, for the first time, polls of all adults favor MAGA candidates. That means that we need to get these people registered and turned out to vote, because yes, they're cheating. We have to do 2 things at the same time. We have to amp up our pile of votes, And we have to cut down on as many fraudulent votes, ultimately to zero, as possible. We have to do both. We have to get the votes because you saw in the elections leading up to 2020, the Republican Party couldn't move the needle. They didn't have to cheat dramatically. Voter registration is very important. We have to communicate also. People on the political right like to slit each other's throats. Now is a really good time to get organized about which candidates to support in primaries. Are we going to continue to support the establishment, or are we going to support people who actually have solutions? This is a guy that wants to go into King County and talk about the sacred cow of elections. Where if I'm light on my estimate for King County, then it means that the presidential election should have swung the other way if all the other counties are fixed as well. The entire system for running elections is broken and completely out of control and has to be brought in. Yet, I go to events in Snohomish County. Does anybody go see me in Snohomish County in May? Robert Sutherland's event? I had a candidate come up to me, ran for a local office, nice lady. Nobody's ever seen anything like her, believe me. And she believes everything we're talking about here. She knows elections are in a trash heap. And she was like, well, the party didn't want me talking about elections or about Trump. And I'm sitting here, it's like the reason you're not in office is because of elections, the way they are. So are we gonna speak the truth to the things that need to be spoken about, or are we just gonna continue to kick the can down the road and hope that by not talking about the obvious problem and the obvious elephant in the room that they're gonna let us into office now? So communicating on candidates is important, and it's never been easier to identify an America First candidate. We can all get bamboozled from time to time, including me. It's happened to me before. I've pushed candidates and backed candidates because I thought they had the right heart for elections. And one of them got elected, South Dakota Secretary of State. She won't return a phone call. But where are you at on elections? Do you believe that elections need to be completely overhauled? Forget Trump for a minute. Do you think that we need to do this, this, and this, and this? Do you think that they're cheating in elections? Do you think they're wide open for fraud? Okay, that's good. Where are you at on medical freedom? You know, it's not as important for Doug as it is for Semi. Medical freedom is something we should all support. And I'm not talking about whether you're vaccinated or not. I'm talking about whether you support the right of people to do as they choose with regard to medical choice. Where are you at on justice for political prisoners or the weaponization of the DOJ? That's an important thing. So you notice that Greg Abbott didn't say a damn word about Ken Paxton until last night. That ought to tell you something. Okay, you notice that a lot of people won't pipe up about elections as long as they didn't lose theirs. And there's a few other issues. Of course, if you're a conservative Christian, you're going to want a pro-life stance. I'm going to encourage you, because I am a conservative Christian, right-wing person. I'm going to tell you, if you want us to take back this state, you have to find in your communication pattern what works. Populism works because it decouples the Republican Party from the Southern social conservatism that alienates the moderate urban vote here. But these other issues that protect our freedoms, elections, medical freedom, political justice, that stuff will always work, and it will help you get back your state. And then finally, turnout. You have to turn out. Now, unfortunately, your turnout is somewhat muted because it's mail ballot turnout. Not a whole lot of excitement about mail ballot elections. But voter registration goes hand in hand with turning out the vote. I am not an endorser of ballot harvesting, but I recognize the reality that some states have mail-in voting and have ballot harvesting. Mike Terry down in Clark County says that they've got it figured out. I know some people in California that have gotten it figured out at least for one election until the Democrats figure out how to adjust. Long-term, ballot harvesting is a losing proposition for conservatives because we do not have the population density in our favor. They can go into the projects and gather up 1,000 ballots at random, and 90% will go to their favor. We can't do that. We can't go into the suburbs and get a 90% rate for our folks by harvesting ballots. That's neither here nor there. But this stuff is important. We have to register voters. We have to communicate about candidates and ideas beforehand, before we have everybody putting pressure on us and the news breathing down everybody's necks. And then we have to turn out the vote. And then finally, we have to show up. We think we're showing up. Well, we also thought that we're leading, but Maricopa County doesn't even have half of its precinct committee man spots filled. I was invited to a commissioner's court in Meade County, South Dakota last month. I was in town, and my host said, hey, can you do an appearance in Meade County? Well, they had no idea who was about to show up to talk about elections in Meade County. So I showed up, and the guy tried to shut me down immediately, and I backed him off. And we talked about elections because South Dakota stuffs their voter rolls with people living in RV parks that aren't actually residents there. so they can sway legislative seats and local seats, you name it. There were about 5 people there that day in a decent-sized county outside of Rapid City. So we're losing our country, and people don't even bother to show up at elections meetings, at county supervisor meetings. They think they show up, or they went one time. But if any of you are familiar with the story of Moses, how many times did Moses go see Pharaoh? One time? Well, God, I went and saw him, and he won't let us go. Ain't going to let us go, ain't going to happen, it's never going to happen, our country's gone, Washington's gone. There's power in the people, there's power in adversity that's going to inspire you to action. I do believe the fight is worth winning, even though it doesn't seem like it's got an end in sight, because I believe it does. Local meetings. Are we writing our letters to the editor? Are you getting your name out there? Are you building who you're going to be for the future? That doesn't mean that you should be pursuing leadership positions for the sake of notoriety. But some of you are leaders, some of you are followers, and it's okay. You have to have both. Anybody who is a military, any veterans in here? Raise your hands. Veterans, please stand up, be recognized. Thank you guys. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. We have to have people that are filling every role. We can't expect to have a good run game if we don't have all 5 offensive linemen on the line. Are we going after our people? We all have people in our lives that have some money. You know, there's a lot of people that are well-to-do that are trying to figure out what to do with it and not be picked apart like a piggy bank and not be abused for being wealthy, that want to invest in our efforts. That's why communication is important, figuring out who we're going to put out there, who we're going to back. Are we funding lawsuits and lawfare? Yes, the courts are corrupt. But I know of several lower profile cases, aka not Kerry Lake's lawsuits, that are going somewhere. I know a guy in Reno, Nevada named Robert Beatles who is wealthy, who puts his money where his mouth is. And he is waging lawfare against the corrupt governor of Nevada, who happens to be this guy, Joe Lombardo. This is a Republican who used to think the elections in Nevada were bad until he needed the money of the establishment Republican Party. He just signed Nevada Senate Bill 406, which makes it a felony to coerce, intimidate, threaten, or harass election workers. But guess who gets to decide what coercion, threats, intimidation, and harassment are? The government. So Beatles is suing this guy. That's putting your money where your mouth is, and that is putting yourself in the line of fire, and that's what it's going to take, because history does not record the actions of people who sat around and thought they were just going to die comfortable, fat, and happy with a lot of money. There are 10 points to true election integrity, which Doug and I have discussed. Usually I present on those. These are the 10 points. The first is to clean out the voter rolls, and I've shown you why. The second is to ban all electronic elections equipment. The third point is to enforce mail-in voting. I'm talking to overseas military and the legitimately disabled. And then number 5, to severely restrict early voting, which happens to serve as the 3-week window for ballot harvesting and getting out these fraudulent ballots. We're going to allow for limited early voting for doctors, nurses, pilots, election workers, and people that legitimately can't turn up on the day that we freaking call Election Day. It's Election Day. All right, number 6, smaller precincts. Once you start voting in person, one of the problems we have with that, Maricopa County, you have a number of precincts with more than 10,000 registered voters per precinct. It prescribes its own issue. It prescribes itself mail-in voting and early voting to alleviate the problem, rather than breaking down into smaller precincts, which will require 5 or 6 times more volunteers and leaders than we already don't have. Number 7, ban ballot harvesting. Secret sauce for mail-in ballot turnout is ballot harvesting, and it's got to go. Number 8, Election Day as a holiday. Anybody that runs statewide on making Election Day into a holiday is going to have populist support from both sides, because that's got more than 75% approval nationwide. It's going to squeeze out the establishment candidates, because we're going to also squeeze out the early vote and the mail vote with it. Who's going to have an issue with a day off to go vote? Number 9, new transparency rules. When it comes to fruition, we're looking at large counties in the state, maybe Snohomish, King, and Pierce, being required to report their votes first. Because in Nevada, Las Vegas and Reno, which are Clark and Washoe counties, they contribute 7 out of every 8 votes. In Nevada, Maricopa and Pima counties in Arizona are 7 out of every 9 votes. Well, the smaller rural counties put their votes in and go home for the election, they're done. And then the large counties count for 8 days. I'm of the belief that even the appearance of impropriety in our elections is enough to make our elections invalid. And then number 10, heavy prison time for those who commit election fraud. Now, I really don't know why PowerPoint corrects firing squads to prison time, but I guess we'll go with it. So with that said, we talked about a lot in an hour. I think you guys agree with me on the numbers. But even if you don't, that's what I challenge people. How can anybody accept that a country that put a man on the moon, cured polio, pioneered manned flight, created all kinds of innovations and technologies that had never been seen before in the history of the world, conquered the West, how can we not run an election that is done on election day, that doesn't leave the country gasping for results and staying up all night wondering what sort of nonsense is going on, waiting for this county or that city to screw the election over for everyone else?
Only one person can win a lottery in this state. They don't cheat lotteries. So if we have a lottery like that, why can't we have an election?
I kind of believe that if Joe Biden beats somebody as hated to them as Donald Trump, that they would want to audit every single ballot just to rub it in our face one more time. I haven't seen a single one of them. But with that said, elections to me is the only political issue that matters. I've laid aside most of my right-wing evangelical Christian beliefs for the sake of fixing elections. Because all the social issues, they come and they go with fair elections. You've seen the 60s come and go. You've seen the 20s come and go. This stuff will go as it's supposed to. It will ebb and flow as long as we have a political pendulum. The problem is the political class has nailed the political pendulum down to where it no longer swings. We have 40 states before any election that are red or blue, and 10 in the middle that get manipulated with one narrative or another. If you're with me on this, and you expect your country for yourself, I'm 38. Yeah, I want to fix the country for myself too. And I've got kids. Some of you have grandkids. Some of you might even have great-grandkids. Then we can't just sit here and hope that it fixes itself. Even if we're a minority, because Sam Adams also said this, it doesn't take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate minority, intent on setting brush fires of freedom in the hearts and minds of men. So I do believe that. I do believe that a few people can start a fire. This is the issue that matters. This is the one that matters, because we're not going to have better pro-life policies, we're not going to have better business and tax policies or border policies or trade policies if we can't get our people in office. And that's what's going on. So with that said, I mean every word up here that I tell you. A lot of you know me offline, a lot of you know me online.
Thank you, Seth Keshel. Before we have Doug come up, our guest of honor, we will have a raffle, I believe. Julie, are you back there? Yes, are we ready to do our raffle drawing? Yes, Lynn is here for that. Great. Right before she does that, on your tables, while we're thinking about getting involved in volunteering, this is called our red flyer. This gives you the rundown of the state of elections in Washington State overall. It lets you know the areas that we need to be able to verify in order to have assurance of election integrity. At the very bottom is a QR code that you can scan with your phone, with your picture photo option on your phone, and it will take you directly to the King County GOP website where you can register to be a PCO. I will talk more about why that's important in just a little bit. Right now we'll do a raffle drawing.
Thank you, Amber. Okay, thank you everyone. And again, you still have a chance to get more raffle tickets. And I was pretty depressed after I heard Captain Seth's speech about what's going on in our state. So anyway, I don't know about you, but when I'm depressed, I like to spend money. We have provided an opportunity. We have auction items in the back. So you can still browse around, and everything goes to Doc's campaign. As we know, more than ever, we need him, right? Yes. County. So please take a look. We got $5, $10, $20, $30 sections. So there's something for everybody. And anything that you can do together will make a difference. Okay, another reason to go back there is we have more volunteers and brought more food of the buffet. So if you feel like if this is something different from what you first got, first round. So feel free to go back there and get more to eat if you like. So I'm going to invite Seth to, I promised the people who bought the raffle tickets, there's from flowers to whiskey. So we're going to start with flowers. So, whiskey it's on the table. Can you take out 10? So we have 10 flower centerpieces to give away. So we'll have Seth take out those winners.
I feel like a Democrat election administrator.
It's completely.
I'm trying to make sure I get the whiskey. Polling shows a 98% chance Seth Keshel's going to get the whiskey.
Just read out the numbers. Right now, we're giving away the centerpieces. There are 10 pieces. Centerpieces.
Okay. 8075 888.
888.
Last three.
Oh, okay. So we have a minute there. For blowers? Yes.
Okay. 009. 982. 022. 022.
Yay, okay.
989.
Yes?
023.
023, anyone? Yes.
005. 640.
640.
890.
There.
026.
026. One more. Thank you.
647.
645.
Barbecue set. 645.
Big one, 645.
645. 645. Barbecue set.
Maybe that was Ann. Anyone? No? Going once? Twice? Okay, 645 that's
030. 030 for the barbecue set. Is barbecue not popular up here?
Oh, we got Lydia. No, it rains here. We don't really.
New people with the energy that.
I'm a Reiki master.
Reiki master, yes.
I can deal with help.
Yes, so this is a $100 certificate towards his service. So we could hold.
990.
Right here.
There you go.
for you gentlemen who forgot a birthday or an anniversary.
Yeah, reminder for Valentine's Day.
885.
So we have someone just donated semi-burst t-shirt, so people can for that.
Semi-bird t-shirt, 646.
Okay.
Okay, the whiskey's 646.
Are you serious? I got whiskey?
Yep.
That's perfect.
Caught you. All right, semi-bird t-shirt, 594.
Congratulations to all the winners and thank you everybody for supporting us. Really appreciate it. Remember to make your way back there.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, Lynn has done an amazing job helping organize this night. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you so much. I have one other person who has really done a lot of the behind the scenes. Thank you so much. Now, I want to get to our guest of honor. I am so very honored to be able to introduce to you Doug Basler. This is a man of integrity, a godly man that I consider a friend. So would you please welcome Doug, our candidate for elections director in King County, Doug Basler.
Ah, shucks. So great to see you guys out here. I'll tell you, I was tired. I ran for Congress like 5 times, and back in 2018, I got involved in election integrity, and I had 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And we all went down to Secretary of State Democrat Kim Wyman's office. Was that my outside voice? I was thinking that maybe that was my inside voice. And requested these recounts. And I took one of my video cameras. You guys know I own an advertising agency, video production company. And I had one of my video cameras. And Tambourine Borelli was part of that group. She was one of the 4 on the other side. And she said, you know, they tell us that we need to trust the system, but we shouldn't have to trust the system. We should know that our elections, there are elections. And so I just, you know, and then one day I was going to Sonic Drive-In for lunch, and Tambourine calls me up and she says, you know, I was talking to my friend, and my friend said, you sound like a Republican. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And I get my food, and I'm driving out into traffic, and she goes, I'm not Donald Trump, I'm changed! I almost drove into the ditch. She was like a Bernie Sanders person, and all of a sudden she's like, loving Trump. I'm like, I just died and went to heaven. And she goes, what do I do now? I said, say, Jesus, come into my heart. Forgive me my sins, and they are many. Bernie Sanders, come on. Who thinks there might be a problem with elections, right? I mean, well, there were some people that thought that. I'm going to skip that one. Here it is.
We brought in folks who, before our eyes, that's from all election machines. There were problems in this election. Before the election, there were complaints about absentee ballots, and the patchwork use of provisional ballots led to unequal treatment under the law. You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. and you can have the election stolen from you.
That's why we keep paper trail on these new electronic machines so that you actually have something you can hang on to after you punch that letter.
He's gay, by the way.
That it hasn't been hacked into.
I'm very concerned that we could have any closure that finally went through.
Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that ballot voting machines and other voting systems are susceptible to tampering.
I agree with tens of millions of Americans very worried that when they cast the ballot on an electronic voting machine, that there is no paper trail to record that vote.
We received more than 50,000 phone calls of people who were denied the right to vote. Stacy is the tax system is fair.
Yeah. So, interesting. So, over 60% believe, right? That was what you were saying. About 62% of Democrats, Republicans, Independents just combined. Now it's a lot more Republicans, I think, but there's a problem with elections. A bunch of Democrats after 2016. And what can happen when the majority feels that elections are untrustworthy? Of course, we talked about it: apathy, anger, and unfortunately, civil war. You know, I've often said it's the ballot or the bullet. You know, the whole thing with voting, the whole thing with the ballot was it kept us from having to solve our differences in other ways. And so, you know, we don't want that, but, you know, that's potential. Obviously, we have a lot of problems with Washington State ballots. Seth covered that, and I'm super stoked. You guys heard about the last month, King County and the middle county votes in the primary swapped out the server. They did it in the middle of the night. The cameras conveniently didn't work. There was no observers. There was no logic and accuracy test. And of course, there was no apologies because, you know, well, we won't let that happen again, you know. So in those of you that don't know, so I'm in my second lawsuit with King County. Of course, it got dismissed. We're in Supreme Court review right now. But I actually deposed my opponent, Julie Wise, the Thursday before I filed to run against her. And yeah, I've been watching Perry Mason reruns. So, you know, hey, I'm pretty good. And so I asked her about a WebEx call in 2020, where all 39 county auditors were on there, including her, and they were upset because they needed to do a software update to vote law in the middle of counting the ballots. And I asked her, you know, 3, 4, 5 times, can't remember. On the 5th time, she goes, well, if you're talking about, and I'm like, yeah, I'm Perry friggin' Mason. So I got the whole thing on video. It's great. It's fun to watch. Yeah, they don't apologize. They're blatant. Unfortunately, fraud is baked into the law. Okay, so why do you want, you know, what could go wrong if elections are rigged? SB 5599, right? How about $1 gallon more for gas for all of us than everybody else? $1.50, you know. I was in Montana last summer on my anniversary, and it was like, you know, $3.02 or something like that, $2.98 or whatever. I was like, they must not have Jay Inslee over here. Basically, they've also passed a law that exempts a lot of our election stuff from public records disclosure, right? That's what happens when elections are rigged, because if you can't be unelected, you can do anything you freaking want to. And that's the problem. And I think Captain Seth really hit the nail on the head. Eventually, people are not going to put up with that anymore. And so let's hope it's now. And I love James O'Keefe, right? Anybody like James O'Keefe? I mean, he's a snot-nosed kid, and he gets the goods on Acorn. Obama's president, you got a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, and they defund Acorn. And why did they do it? Because everybody got pissed off about it. And that's what has to happen now. So why do you want to support a campaign like mine? Okay, so who's the most important person in the King County elections director race? It's you. You're the one. You know, I can't do this by myself. I'm just one guy. I got one vote just like you got. I worked my butt off, and I'm excited to be able to do it. But my whole life, my career, and what I do for a living is I produce and place primarily TV commercials. I mean, we also do TikTok and Facebook and all that stuff, right? But we do video advertising. It's what I do for a living. As a political candidate, I have a couple of advantages that my business clients, Planet Fitness doesn't get, that the pizza joint doesn't get. I get lowest unit rate. Okay, so I get the best deal you can get on TV airtime, radio airtime, and anything that's broadcast. Okay. I also can't be censored. I can say anything I want. They actually had a guy that said F Trump, but he didn't say F, he said the word, and they had to air it down in Arizona because that's the law. Okay, so candidates have, I have the ability to James O'Keefe them, okay? With your help, I can do it. Now, anybody that's worked with me, and many of you have, Rick Forschler over there, we got him and 3 other people elected with some really great commercials. The CTAC caught them flat-footed, got 60%, not one of them got less than 60%. And he was part of the Forschler 4. I think he was the stretchy guy. But we had the flame guy and the invisible girl and all that. It was great. Scott Stevenson did a lot of TV commercials. Keith Swank's back there. You guys know, man, nobody gets the deals like I get, right? We get the deals. We get the placement. So the trick is, will you tell the truth? You see, they tell me I can't win because they cheat. Well, guess what? If I can't win, I can say anything I want. It don't matter, right? But if I say anything I want, it might work. So I want to talk about another person that's a great patriot. Jane, where are you? Jane Jin. There she is. I said to Jane Jin back in May, I'm thinking about running for elections director. She handed me $1,000 on the spot. Then she bought VIP to come tonight. I said, Jane, you can only do $100 more. She said, let me get my checkbook. And so I'm running because of her. She made me run. And you guys all know Big Mike Micron? He goes, I get the other grand. Because it's a $2,100 filing fee. This girl, Julie Wise, running King County elections, yeah, she's got an AA degree. And she makes $211,000 a year. So the filing fee is a percentage of what you make, right? I ran for Congress. What's a congressman make? Scott Stevenson, who also ran for Congress, 175, 178? Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the whole thing's rigged. And she ain't smart. Remember Perry Mason? Yeah, he got her to break down on the stand. Will I say something? Well, here's my first commercial. This aired during the presidential debate that the top guy didn't go to, but it came on right before the closing statements, and my phone blew up, and my text blew up. Here it is. I call it Vote House Rock. A little scrap of paper in today's mail.
Well, I'm about it, you were mailed. Mix of bills and car sales. And I'd like to be a vote someday, but there's so many ways I could fail.
Well, that's why I'm running for King County Elections Director, so we can clean up voter rolls, secure chain of custody, and restore election integrity.
Oh yeah! Well, vote Doug Basler for King County Elections Director and make me into a real vote.
So, Ballot joined me today. You guys probably see Ballot. Hey, Seth, do you know Mike Lindell? Because I got my Ballot pillow. I'm thinking, I know he picks up entrepreneurs. So on this side, Ballot is happy because he's a certified legally cast vote, but on this side, he's not happy because he's not a certified legally cast vote. So, just so you know. So I'm thinking I want to give Ballot and 2 coffee cups with him on it away to somebody if they would donate, I don't know, $500. I think I'd give it to you. Then you guys could have a date night, filling out your ballots, have some coffee with some whiskey in it, or something like that. Here's the next ad. If you've been on my website, it's under the Zombies tab. Notice what the zombie says.
secure in U.S. history.
The most secure in history. The most secure in history of the country. The election ran just about as long as it possibly could.
This was the safest election we've ever had. The most secure election we ever had. It was the most secure election in American history. It was the most secure election.
Well, somebody's lying.
I'm Doug Basler for King County Elections Director, and make me to agree to vote.
So I had one of my political consultant friends goes, well, they're going to call you an election denier. And I'm like, whatever. Who cares? I mean, that's what I want to do. We have another ad that we're working on. You guys familiar with, it's ghost ballots on the sly. So we're going to have ballots going to be a ghost. And so I'm not afraid to say what needs to get said. And so, I'm really, really glad that you guys are here. And I agree 100% with Captain Seth over here. This is not the time to back off. This is the time to step in. They are panicking. They are getting weird. This idea of switching on a server in the middle of the night and stuff like that, so the Seattle Times contacted me. Well, you want to talk to our e-board? And I said, I'm not really interested in your endorsement, and so they came out and said, Doug wants paper ballots. And last time I checked, mail-in ballots are paper. I don't know what the deal is. But they didn't quite get it right because I want in-person voting with ID on election day, hand counted at precinct level. So, but the other stuff's baked into the law, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we can't get, but if I get James O'Keefe from now, imagine what I could do as elections director, right? So ever since 2018, I've done recounts every year, just a precinct or two, because I can afford that. And this last year, I count 2 precincts, and it was all wacky, but it all eventually came out exactly right. But there was this extra stack of ballots off to the side that had orange cover sheets on it. And I said, hey, what's with the ballots with the orange cover sheets? And they said, and the guy says, oh, that's military ballots. That's ballots that were emailed or faxed in. Now, I didn't know you could email or fax a ballot in. But apparently, if you're out of the country, the law allows it. And so then the other lady goes, oh, they're all military, but, it's, well, I think it's predominantly military. So the interesting thing about the recount is that they counted all the other ballots, and then they counted those ballots separately. So I got to see the separate count on those ballots. So military ballot, you figure I'm going to get like 50%, 60, 70%, right? I mean, military ballots, right? I got 0. 100% of those ballots went to Adam Smith. So, I don't know, but something smells a little fishy, right? So, there's a lot of stuff that we need to look at. And there's a lot of stuff that we need to do. Win, lose, or draw, I'm in this, I'm 100% in, my business is always at risk, but whatever, I believe in Jesus. And He's my supply. And my friend Rick Forshler over here once told me, he said, people go to meetings and they think that's getting involved. But it's not. Getting involved is getting involved. Going to meetings is just going to a meeting. And this is where we come and we learn, and we can do things. We can be a PCO. We can volunteer. I'm hoping that you'll all volunteer. We're going to set up phone banks. Okay, that's about what we can do. It's a lot. It's 1 million plus registered voters in King County. Most of them are dead. You won't have to talk to them. It's great. You can just leave a voicemail. It's going to be great. I already got that. If you're a PCO, we'll just let me know how many handouts you need to canvass your precinct. I'm going to fight all the way to the end on this, and if I win, I'm going to start concealed carrying because I don't think they're going to like me. So, James O'Keefe again, be brave. do something. Okay, everybody do something. God bless you. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name's Doug Basler, and I approve this message.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. This message needs to get out. We have been in a desert of media voice for a long time. The media is propaganda, and we have had zero influence. Zero influence. This is what we need. Regardless, I want Doug to win more than anything. Regardless of that, he has a voice right now. He's your voice right now. And that takes money, time, volunteers, support, all of that. And I know that you were invited here to help with the money part too. So I want you to make sure that you take your checkbooks out. The limit is $1,200 if you have donated for other things. So your ticket price is included in that, right? So if you paid $100 for a VIP ticket today, you may not donate more than $1,100. Please be very careful of that. I don't want to give his treasurer a heart attack. I know everybody always says this is the most important election, and we hear it all the time. I don't know that there is a more important election. This is essential. Our elections are a mess, a hot mess. And I don't know that we can get out of it. I really don't. But I know that we can tell the public what's going on. And I know that Doug will do that for us. So please write a check no cash, right? Cash has to be less than $100. So please, if you can write a check, if you can donate through his website, that works really well too. You have to make sure you give your information, employer information, retirement information. We want to make this as easy as possible for his campaign. The more we do to support that, the better. But please, give a little, add a zero on, double it if you can, whatever you were planning to do tonight. Please support him in every way that you can. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight. I think we have other candidates that are here still. Semi, can you stick around? Yes. And Carmen, can you stick around? And Narev, I know you just got here. We want to make sure that people can meet Narev Sheth, right, as well. He's also running in the 8th Congressional District. I want to make sure. Yes, go ahead. Yep.